Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here with a Screenwriters Rant on Dexter New Blood. Season 9? I guess they're just bringing Dexter back after a while. I did watch the first couple of seasons, enjoyed it, um, but I kind of heard what happened towards the end. It's a really tough premise to sustain, but we'll get into it. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Please check out my books if you'd like to support the channel. Links in the description. Woke a novel, Hollywoke, another novel, and of course the Pineys books 1 through 6. Comedy horror in South Jersey. Book 7 dropping soon. Right, Little Joan? Book 7. All at Amazon.com. Kindle Unlimited is free. Now, Dexter New Blood. Dexter, they're basically resetting it, which they kind of had to after problems in the old season. Plus, a character like this. Here's the thing about serial killers: they're kind of overdone, and I talked about this before in other movies and whatnot. They're very overdone, and they're rarely done right because most serial killers are so screwed up. They just don't function, right? They don't function. They're just messed up human beings. That's why they do this. The movie trope is a serial killer, and he kills, and he's so smart, and he tricks the cops, and he can just run around it. And then this was turning it on its head, right? This is a good, quote-unquote, serial killer, a guy who has, for some reason, the same kind of urges, but a cop channeled them for good. Which, again, is a cool premise. It's not realistic, but then not all premises are totally realistic. But it's one you can go kind of buy up to a point, right? And I've played with the concept myself in various projects. I got a project that kind of plays on this. But understand that the character's always super dark, right? He kills people. That's a big thing. So in terms of the writing, I think this is probably a good move because it's a reset. You can get away you can just forget about what happened in the previous series, which apparently a lot of people do. I didn't see the last couple of episodes, but yeah, it just kept ticking up and ticking up and ticking up, and eventually it becomes untenable because that's part of the issue with serial killers. They keep escalating. They escalate and escalate and escalate and either get caught or they die or they complete their mission, right? I always talk about the example, the real guy, the guy who hunted serial killers, the guy who started profiling, wrote in his book about the one serial killer. He had killed a bunch of women, and then finally he killed his mother. And they found him sitting in the kitchen with the body. He had been there for hours. He didn't even try to leave. And they caught him, and they said, "Why didn't you try to run?" And he said, "What would be the point?" See, that's what these guys are doing. A lot of them are gearing up to kill someone, or it's about killing their mother, and their mother's already dead, or whatever. And so the realism part of this, if you know anything about these guys, it's only so real. Now, that being said, if you can overlook that, and a lot of people can, it's still kind of an untenable position because he's a dark character. But that's kind of a positive from a writing standpoint. It makes it very challenging, but you gotta be top notch. And when the writing sort of went downhill on Dexter for whatever reason, I didn't follow it that close. I assume the storylines had got more and more ridiculous because they couldn't up the ante anymore. It really has to be kept small. That's a real danger. You can't up the ante that quickly, especially in something like this, right? Because it's one thing for him to kill bad guys, right? And that can be interesting. Over and over again, he keeps doing it, and Dexter never changes, but the various victims do. That can be an interesting thing. So, I remember watching, I think the last season I watched was the one with Jimmy Smits. And that was an interesting season because he doesn't start out as a character that Dexter would normally target, but by the end of the season, yeah, he's got to take him out, right? He sort of finds a guy who could be like him, but in the end, he realizes no, he can't handle it either, and he goes too far, and then Dexter has to end him. So, but he's not a hero, right? And you have to keep that in mind when you watch a series like this, and the writers have to keep that in mind. Dexter's not a hero. He's a deeply flawed character. He's not a hero. A hero wouldn't kill people like this. He tries to be a hero. He's a flawed guy, but he's not really. He's the hero of the story, you could say, but he's not a hero in the classic sense. He's very disturbed, because you can't not be a serial killer and not be disturbed. And like, he stopped for a long time as part of the premise of the series, which is another thing that these guys don't. It doesn't really happen. They go to jail and they're forced to stop, essentially, and then they get out of jail. That's why they didn't catch some of them, because they're forced to stop for committing other crimes sometimes, and then. So will it be a good show? If they have good writers, it'll be a good show. It always comes back to the writing, especially on a series like this. This isn't about like seeing a big, explosions and whatnot. This is about seeing if they can, integrate the character back into what works for him. And what works for him would be, see, if I were going to do this character, I wouldn't have had him married or with a girlfriend, no way. And I get it, like, that's part of his MO, he goes through the motions, whatever. But in my view, a guy like that would never be able to go through the motions enough to get a girlfriend. Not really. Not a long-term one where he's getting married and had a kid and all that kind of stuff. I think you would have to keep him single. You would have to make the stories more about the people around them than him, which I think would be the strength of the series. It's kind of like, in a way, Tales from the Crypt, right? The Crypt Keeper's always there. He's always very dark and laughing and, saying various things. But ultimately, it's about other things because he is unchanging. He is forced to be unchanging. And I think, trying to develop him is part of the issue that Hollywood writers would run into. You can't really develop a guy who's so messed up he kills people and has to. You kind of can't develop them. They don't really develop. That's part of their problem. So it would be better to keep Dexter kind of like you would keep Batman or James Bond. You keep him sort of static and status quo. He's always very careful. He always gets away. But then it's about, you can hint at the danger of maybe he almost gets caught here and there. But ultimately, you want to make it about the other characters. That, to me, is more interesting. That, to me, was the interesting part of the show. Like, why does he target this particular guy for death? Right? And, and how he gets away with it. And that to me was always fun. When it gets into his brother and his history and all that kind of stuff, that's a payoff that, unless you're going to end the show, you don't want to go down that path. So it's the same thing with Batman and Superman and James Bond, all these big characters. If you're going to go down that path, you're ending the show. You're progressing the show to its end. Don't do that. Stay on the other path. Make it about the other characters. Dexter's there, and he's very interesting already. You don't have to do much to Dexter to make him interesting. He's already an incredibly interesting premise that you're playing with. Add to the show by giving him more victims, more people he saves, and more ways that he has to get out of his crazy situations with his life and, still getting away with murder. So, November 7th, it drops back on Showtime. That's where it was before, right? It'll be interesting to see if it's any good. And that's it for me and Little Joan today. We're going to call it a night. Please check out our other videos on Bitchute and Rumble. You're only getting half your Joan videos if you don't go to Bitchute and Rumble. That's only where they are, Joan. Just at Bitchute and Rumble. And we'll see you tomorrow.